Chelsea FC. How have the summer signings done so far?
I think it's been like a mixed bag. First and foremost, obviously, it's very, very early to be judging. It's been like 2 real months of football. I know the games have been super crammed up, but with injuries and everything, it is a little early to judge. But just listing off them, and I'll just say what I think about them so far. Like starting off with Koulibaly, I think great center back. He's struggled slightly to adjust to the Premier League, which is completely normal. Not everyone is Thiago Silva who can just come in at 38 years old and boss the league. But what did worry me when we did sign him, like the transfer fee was perfect, 30 odd million for, I would say, one of the best defenders in the world, like top 10 at least. But we gave him like a 4-year contract, which worries me because he's 32 now.
31, 32, I think, yeah.
Yeah, 31, 32. He would keep him till like he's 35. Again, not everyone is Thiago Silva, so I don't know how he's going to, be that good for that long. But he's had good games. In Europe, he's looked a lot better than in the Premier League, which, again, understandable. He's more used to that kind of play. So it's still early doors. Given the defensive kind of crisis that we've had, we definitely did need, a leader like him, especially after losing Rudiger. And then when on the flip side, the young signing from Leicester, Wesley Fofana, again, very hard to judge because he played a few games and now he's out injured. But he did look, again, okay in those games. Like one of the game against Milan where he got injured, he looked really good. But the other games, he was still adapting to the team. You could see what he could do in terms of breaking the lines and moving with the ball. So positive signs, but again, we haven't seen enough to make a real judgment. But based on the price, the price was a little expensive, but at the same time, when you consider that he had just signed a new contract with Leicester, there was no way we were getting him for any cheaper. So yeah, those two have been okay. Hoping for a lot better from them, and we can see a lot more. Another defensive signing, I guess, Marc Cucurella. Great player. I'm a big fan of him. Again, when price maybe a little too expensive, but when you consider the need in the squad, I think it's worth it, and his age profile as well. Like young, he will be at Chelsea for the next 4 to 5 years. When you consider how important wingbacks are to our system and how lost we look when like Reece James and Ben Chilwell, you need a quality. I'm not going to say a backup, but quality competition to be able to rotate on a weekly basis like Man City do and all the top teams do. So I think he will be really, really good as a signing, and I'm not worried about the price at all. It's also great that he's, now in hindsight, he's worked under Potter, so it's great. But when we signed him, obviously that wasn't the case. I think sometimes with Cucurella, like Chelsea fans have been a little harsh on him. I think he might be because he's played under Potter and is used to playing that like a system that Potter plays. He's one step ahead of his other Chelsea teammates in terms of knowing what to do. But the thing is, his Chelsea teammates aren't on the same page yet. So a lot of times you'll see him do like a give and go, and he's made a different run to what the other player would have expected. And, we lose the ball and he's out of position and stuff like that. And so the blame normally goes on, what has Cucurella done? He's out of position. But like when you think about it from the different way where he's used to, his teammates playing a certain way under the manager. And so when you take that into account, it's like, you can be less harsh on him. I think he's another player. He had, I think, appendicitis, and he had to like get an operation. And so he lost like 5 or 6 pounds in like a week in that. And that is a lot for like a high performance athlete. And then that's when you saw him, get hooked at halftime, get hooked before halftime. And so the narrative around him isn't great at the moment among Chelsea fans, but I still think there's a really, really good player there. very technical, very different to what Ben Chilwell offers in the same position, which would be interesting, and offers quality competition and depth. So I really like him as a signing. Then I guess we have Raheem Sterling, who
Of course,
started off really well. Was the top scorer. He still is the top scorer this season, but most of those goals came under Tuchel, where he was the focal point of the system. It hasn't been the same under Potter. You know, we've seen him play in a variety of different positions. Some people would say as a wing back as well, but you know, if you've seen his average position in those games, he's not played as a wing back, which, you know, we'll get into the systems and use of players when we kind of talk about Potter, but that's not a fault on Raheem Sterling that he's been asked to do different things. I still think there's a good player in there. We signed him for I think 50 million, which is pretty cheap, you know, in today's market for a player like Sterling. Yeah, and hopefully, I think he's been lacking confidence this whole month, you know, trying to adapt to a new manager and system. But hopefully he regains, you know, the confidence with England, similar to how he did at the Euros, where, you know, he was, I think, England's top scorer at the Euros, or one of the, like, second highest scorers.
He was one of the best. I think he may have been behind Kane.
Yeah,
he was up there, definitely.
Hopefully he, you know, he can have that kind of, because, you know, Gareth Southgate is going to trust him.
Like, sure, yeah. He's got his favourites.
Yeah, so he's going to play, and hopefully he can have a positive impact and then come back and hit the ground running at Chelsea. I still think he's a good player for sure. Been disappointing off late, but again, who hasn't at Chelsea? And then Carney Chukwuemeka, good signing according to me. Like, from what we've seen so far, we've seen him play like 2 or 3 games where he's come on as a sub. As for an 18-year-old, like we spoke about Lewis Hall earlier, Chukwuemeka is another player who will be, you know, knocking on Graham Potter's door once he's fit. So he's picked up an injury, which is why he hasn't played, which is a big missed opportunity for him, because these are the games where he would have played a lot. Yeah. And we would have actually got to see him properly. But he will be back when they go to Abu Dhabi for their training camp. So another player who has 40 days with Graham Potter to, you know, impress him even further. Very exciting what he did at Aston Villa. So, you know, you can only hope for the best. Things always don't translate with you know, youth football. But one thing about him is his size, you know, like that is very promising. You know, he can play in a Premier League team just given his size and his stature and stuff. So again, promising from him. Now we can get on to like the not promising ones. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who, you know, I've said before I would have preferred Tony to come in over him, and especially when the owners knew they were going to sack Tuchel, why sign Aubameyang, who was clearly a Tuchel signing. 33 years old. It is only a 2-year deal, so it's not like, you know, long term. But at the same time, it's baggage that you didn't really need. Started off well under Potter, so, you know, he's a Tuchel signing was out of the window because he was scoring goals for Potter. But again, it's hard to judge when all your best players are injured. Like the connection he had with Reece James was amazing. Reece was assisting him almost every game until he got injured, and after that you have no creativity in the whole side. So it's hard to blame a striker, you know, and call him shit because, you know, he hasn't had chances created for him. But that signing as a whole, I wasn't really on board with. So I guess we have to see how it pans out at the end of the season and how many goals he's got, because, you know, we've only got him for goals. Like, he can do all the help us with the build up all he likes, but if he hasn't scored the goals, he's a failure. And the number 9 curse continues. And then I guess Dennis Zakaria again. If you're sacking Tuchel, if you're sacking Tuchel and you know you're gonna sack Tuchel, why sign Dennis Zakaria? So he's been another one who didn't. Again, you said you've forgotten about him, but he just played 2 games.
2 games.
Yeah, he played against City as well, so that made it 2.
Fair enough,
but he's looked good in those games, which is weird, because, you know, he's been a ghost for the whole season so far. But I guess also just been adapting to a new country, and that's never easy. Like, we often forget the human element
For sure, yeah.
of all these things. He's going to the World Cup with Switzerland, so that's where, we actually get to see him on a regular basis. And hopefully, we have a midfield crisis right now, so he will be getting more minutes once he's back. So I guess, a lot with a lot of these signings, as you will see, like, it's too early to like actually make a proper judgment. They've had like injuries that have halted their progress. We've had a whole new manager that has halted their progress. So it's hard to judge, but most of them I think are good signings for the long term.
For sure, yeah. And with someone like Zachariah as well, if it doesn't work out, he's alone, he goes back. It's a low risk, high reward sort of signing. So fair enough. You touched on it there about the managers changing. What did you make of Tuchel's departure at the time he went? And now looking back on it, how do you feel about it?
Well, at the time I was devastated. Like, I have not loved it. I loved Frank Lampard at Chelsea.
Yeah.
And I thought he was amazing that first season where he got us top four when we had absolutely no right to get top four.
Oh, no, definitely.
And obviously Lampard, club legend, you have to love him. And when he got sacked, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to love a Chelsea manager as much as I did Lampard. And then this charismatic German guy comes in, just like happy to be here, happy to be working with these players, like just changes the whole atmosphere at the club, and is just the most likable person. Goes on to win the Champions League, which again, we had no right to win that.
Yeah.
Even like we had no right to be that good. I'm not gonna say we had no right to win that, because we were the best team in every game that we played. But we had no right to like win that tournament after the squad we had and stuff like that. Completely turns it all around, and is just again the most likable person. He's brought back the connection with the fans that Lampard had. And I don't think there was a single Chelsea fan at that moment who didn't like Tuchel the person. There was a lot of people who didn't agree with his tactics that were very pragmatic, especially this season, what we've seen, and towards the end of his reign. He's had to deal with situations that no football manager should ever have to deal with,
or ever has, really.
Or ever has. Like, constant questions about the war, constant questions about things he has no answer to, really.
No.
And kind of the way that he navigated through all of that just makes me respect him so much more as a human. And in an ideal situation, like that structure that Roman Abramovich, where it was just Marina making all the decisions with, Petr Cech, little insight from Petr Cech and the scouting department, was perfect for Tuchel, because he's never been good with dealing with owners. We've seen that at PSG, we've seen that at Dortmund, Mainz. He was just allowed to do the football stuff, which he is one of the best in the world at.
For sure.
And so it was going so well. And after all that he's done, you would think he would get time. But then, like, you asked me what you felt at the time and what you feel now. Now, when I look back, it's like, I know why this happened. It had nothing to do with what was going on the pitch and how poorly we were performing. It was the fact that, in a time where there's been new owners who are changing the organizational structure of the club, he was not willing to cooperate in a manner that they thought he would at the beginning, like, because they came in to the season being like, we're gonna back him, and they fully believed that he was the right person, because he was collaborating in the beginning. But I guess like he could only do so much, which again, it's like, it's hard to fault anyone in this situation. It's just two different people from different backgrounds and ideologies. It's hard to put blame on Bowley for sacking Tuchel. It's hard to put blame on Tuchel for not collaborating in a proper manner and stuff like that. Like, he's not that kind of person.
No.
And so when he was asked to do a lot of like non-football things, or things that were outside of like the training ground, we started to see like some friction between them. And I was actually at the summer tour, because they had come to America, and I had press passes and everything, so I was going to the press conferences, and Tuchel was not a happy man. Like you
No.
would think, preseason happy vibes, put on a smile for the fans.
But no.
Like we got battered 4-0 by Arsenal,
I remember
and
that.
like I will never forget that press conference because he literally just threw everyone under the bus, like all the players. I don't know if you've seen this quote from him on Twitter, but it's like it's the same players, so how can things change?
Yeah, I remember
things
that.
like that. And he at one point in the preseason, he had like told like people, like he was talking to the players in the dressing room, and he was like, the people that want to stay at Chelsea this season, put your hands up. The people who want to leave, you're free to go.
Yeah.
And like there was literally a division in the dressing room of people who wanted to leave, which we had so many. Lukaku was there. Lukaku wasn't there in preseason, but like Timo Werner, Ziyech, Pulisic,
Hudson-Odoi.
a lot of people, Hudson-Odoi, a lot of people who have left, but at the same time, a lot of people who wanted to leave but have been forced to stay at Chelsea.
Chalobah?
Chalobah
He
was
wanted to
supposed to
go to
leave.
Stoke,
Yeah, like there was literally such a huge division where like half the squad wanted to leave, half wanted to stay, and there was then favoritism to those who wanted to stay and more attention to them. So it was never gonna end well once
No.
the cracks started to appear.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also been going through like a divorce in his personal life, and
Yeah.
there's just been so much going on that maybe it was more that he bit off more than he could chew.
Mm-hmm. Too much to
At
handle.
that point. And so while he great manager, one of my favorite Chelsea managers, we're gonna do the Chelsea manager list,
Yeah.
the tier list, and you'll see how highly I rate him in that. But at the same time, it was time to go, and if Chelsea are to move forward from Abramovich, I think it had to be with a manager that is
Potter.
more
Yeah.
collaborative, and like Graham Potter.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was
It was-
pretty
it-
long.
Yeah, that
answer,
was
but, yeah.
that was a monologue, I must say. I mean, yeah, Tuchel's a rough one. I mean, also part of this displeasure he had during pre-season, I still wonder if Bowley had kind of gone to him, I don't really want you here. Let's be honest, we all know that Bowley had his eyes on Potter. He had his eyes on Potter
Yeah.
for ages, and I'm going to be honest, I think that's why Cucurella went to Chelsea. I think Bowley went to Potter. I want to bring one of your players to Chelsea. Which one do you want me to bring? And I'll get you in a couple of weeks later. It's so strange because Tuchel didn't really do anything wrong. It was a weird time you sacked him. I know you just lost to Salzburg, but nobody really expected him to go then. But Bowley just went, bang, yep, time to go. And he went. So I think Bowley had made up his mind before the season had started, yet then waited until the season started to sack him.
Yeah.
The decision
I
was the right one, but it was the timing.
Yeah, exactly, the timing. And he had made the decision after pre-season, essentially. Like after the disastrous tour that it was, and the kind of like fights that were going on in the dressing room and everything. The decision was made, which is why you question the signings of Aubameyang and Zakaria. Like why are you signing those players, especially on deadline day when like at that point you knew he was gone.
Yeah, so a week later he goes.
Yeah, the timing element again. Yeah, it's really like that would be my only slight on Todd Bowley and the ownership. Like they could have planned this a lot better.
Yeah,
and executed it a lot better too.
We're going to get on to Bowley in a second. But before we do, how has Graham Potter done so far this season? We touched on him there. He came in to replace Thomas Tuchel. How's he done?
I think he's only been people forget, honestly, because we played so much football, that he's only been at Chelsea for like 2 months, which is, when you think about it, with no preseason, is like nothing. Like
Mad.
2 months is absolutely nothing. But even within those 2 months, you can break his Chelsea career down into 2 halves, where the first half is when he had all the players fit. We were unbeaten in our first 10 games under Graham Potter. We had smashed AC Milan, champions of England, twice, at home and away. We had gone from bottom of our Champions League group to qualifying with a game in hand, which is something we didn't expect after the first 2 games.
Yeah.
We were doing well in the Premier League. We beat Wolves 3-0, beat Palace 2-1, beat Aston Villa 2-0, and then Reece goes down. And slowly, all our best players, Fofana goes down, Reece goes down, Conte had he hasn't even had a single training session with Conte because he's just been out. Who N'Golo Kante anyway is such a huge miss.
Yeah.
But then when you also add in missing, I would say the best right back in the world, who is also our best player at Chelsea, missing them, then Fofana going out. Koulibaly was injured for 2 weeks. Cucurella had an operation, missed a week. Chilwell then got out. Like it's just been like slowly people have just been falling down. Yeah, Mendy got injured, Kepa had to come in, then Kepa started doing well, Kepa got injured, Mendy had to come back in. Like
it's a mess. It's a massive mess. I mean,
it's been insane, and I can't even imagine. It's a mess, and all this while he's still getting to learn about his players because he's again only been there for 2 months. And it's hard to formulate. Like we saw Tuchel with the same players and they struggle to play. So imagine how hard it must be without the best players of that lot, and still like you don't even know what their best positions are, you don't know what their best attributes are yet. And so it's like the last 5 games have been awful, like really boring, really bad, like no attack whatsoever, no cohesion, no team chemistry, and you can see that this process is going to take time, and Potter hasn't had it. And when you also talk about time, like they've been playing a game every 3 days, 3 or 4 days. And so when you consider that, like if you play on Sunday, Monday's rest and recovery, so that's you can't train. Tuesday you train, but then you play on Wednesday, and then you recover Thursday, train on Friday, you play again on Saturday or Sunday. So you're only getting like 2 days a week to train with these players. And when you 2 days a week for 2 months is like they've barely had like a whole month of training, like in total number of days. And so when you consider that, you really like that's when you kind of understand that, okay, yeah, this process is going to take more time than like a regular manager change, because of all these factors, like injuries, not just the injuries, but fixture congestion, still getting to know your players, still getting to know your club, playing European football for the first time, which is another change. Not for the first time, Champions League football for the first time. He's played in the Europa League before. But yeah, these are all changes that he's going to have to get used to, and even the players are getting used to new coaching staff and stuff like that. We talked about Sterling and how he's been asked to do a variety of different things, and the reason for that is obviously the injuries. Like you're not going to have Sterling play as a pseudo right wing back if Reece James is fit. No. Same with like Pulisic and stuff like that. So there's been formation changes every game. There's been, which is normal with Potter, but like formation changes in a way that you wouldn't be having if all the players were fit. You would have more consistency in what you were building and a consistent style of play, which we saw in the first 10 games, but that's been completely abandoned right now because we don't have the players to play that same way. And so it's been very unfortunate for Potter, and I know a lot of Chelsea fans are very, very frustrated and want him out already, which is outrageous to me. But I am really excited. Like when you talk about Graham Potter, you also have to talk about the people that have come with him from Brighton. So you have Kyle McCauley, who's going to be not heading up our recruitment, but he's going to be basically the Petr Cech role, where
part of the team.
He's going to be because him and Graham Potter have worked together their whole careers. Straight from Ossisons, and so they understand, like he understands the kind of player Potter wants, the kind of football he wants to play, and he's going to bring that to the recruitment team. So we've also got Paul Winstanley coming from Brighton, who will be heading up co-head of recruitment, along with another person we're trying to get, Christopher Vivell. So we're this is going more into the ownership part of the conversation, but we're seeing that structure starting to take place, and Potter is going to play a huge role in that, because that was the whole collaboration element that Tuchel was missing, with collaborating with this team for better recruitment, and that way you avoid the Sauls, the Lukakus, and all the failures that we've had over the last few years, because our recruitment was just a shambles. We would just throw money at problems. So this is going to take time, and I really hope Chelsea fans are more patient with him, because I know the owners are going to be patient with him, at least till the end of the season and beyond that as well. I think the Potter out is too premature. But again, another long answer for
Yeah,
a question.
and I don't think it's going to be the last either, because I'm moving
For
on.
sure.
I'm moving on now to talk about Todd Bowley. How's he done? Very interesting start. I mean, it all started with the interesting tactics from Bowley going to Tuchel, asking him to play the 4-4-3 formation. Which, I mean, mate, if you want to field no goalkeeper or field 12 players, be my guest. It might not go very well for you though, and he's split opinion with his ideas of all-star games and things like this. But how do you think he's done?
I think when you consider the 4-4-3s and everything, I think he's done really, really, really well. And I'll it's another long answer because this guy, like the takeover of Chelsea, is the most historic takeover in the history of sport. Like no takeover first of all, like it's the most expensive one, 4.25 billion, the most expensive sports franchise in the world. And when you consider that it was done in like 3 months, like that is absolutely unheard of in terms of sports takeovers. Like when you think about Newcastle, that took 18 months for them to finalize everything. And that was just Newcastle. That's like a relegation team that, these Saudi owners wanted to buy. And the reason it took them so long is because when you do takeovers of, this size, you want to do it right? And you want to have the structure in place. And so they got, their team in place before they took over. They had like Amanda Stavely, I think her name is.
Amanda Stavely, yeah.
Yeah, they got the head of recruitment from Brighton. I forget what his name is, but they got him
Dan
as
Ashworth,
well.
that's it.
Dan Ashworth, yeah. They had the team in place to then take over, right? And so that's why they've been able to do it well. But when you only have 3 months with a bidding war among the biggest billionaires in the world, then it completely changes things. You come into an environment like Chelsea was a distressed asset. Let's not forget that they were sanctioned. We couldn't sell tickets.
No.
We couldn't open the mega store. So when you come in, football is the last thing you're thinking about at that point. You're thinking about how do I get this business up and running again? And they did a really good job at that. I think with what they've done with the mega store, the renovations they've had at Stamford Bridge, which are very minimal so far. And we expect them to do a lot more at Stamford Bridge. The ticketing side of things, like the women's team has sold out their tickets for a second season running. There's a lot more content on the app and the website for, not just interviews with first team players, but academy players. A lot more like academy games every academy game is like streamed now, or like not good. Every game at Kingsmeadow, which is where the academy team play. Every game there is being streamed, and there's change. You've seen a lot of changes behind the scenes, things that you wouldn't really notice until you kind of see them, which they've done really, really well at. And then when you then come onto the football side, like obviously these guys have no idea about the sport.
Nope.
4-4-3s don't exist. They don't know that. And that's why they needed, the collaborative approach with the head coach, which was Tuchel. And that's why they were like, okay, which players do you want? And we'll go out and get them. And that's how that kind of relationship started, where it was like, okay, this maybe could work with Tuchel and them. But slowly, that became more where like the Ronaldo one, for example, where they're asking him, why can't we get Ronaldo? And Tuchel is a football guy, and anyone with a football brain knows that signing Ronaldo doesn't make sense for this Chelsea team. So he's not going to have, while his team are shit on the training ground, he's not going to have the patience to sit down and explain to Bowley why signing Ronaldo doesn't make sense. Because from his standpoint, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's where, friction started to happen. But at the same time, when you think about what he's done in terms of building contacts, we've all seen him having dinners and great meal and wonderful food with all these executives, building relationships, not just with executives, with agents, with intermediaries, things like that, establishing contact with Jude Bellingham, for example, Endrick, who's this Brazilian wonder kid.
Yeah, I know about Endrick.
Like when you think about things like that, like it's not like like when he took over, people were afraid of, what's happening with United and the Glazers, where it's like a non-existent owner. This guy is hyper involved, maybe too involved for
for someone that
the
doesn't know
betterment.
about football.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't blame him for not trying. Like he is trying to make this work, and also when I spoke about not having the structure because you only had 3 months, what he is now doing to build that structure has been impressive as well. Like he's trying to recruit the best talent from Brighton, the Red Bull group, which he's a very big fan of because he wants a multi-club model approach at Chelsea. And so we've been hiring people, Joe Shields as well from Southampton. We've hired him, and you can slowly start to see the structure take place. Like this kind of stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long process. It takes time, and when you see it slowly taking place, you kind of understand his vision. Like he doesn't want to be sporting director as much as we want. We don't want that, and he doesn't want that. He wants a department in place so that he can step away from the sporting side and focus on the business side, which is where his expertise is in.
For sure.
And so until we don't have that structure in place, it's like you're gonna see weird signings, you're gonna see weird decisions, which we've seen with Oba and Dennis Zakaria, which we've spoken on. But I think it's going to be different in January, where we don't have the full structure in place, but we have some structure, so it's not Bowley doing anything other than the negotiating for players, and it's the structure that is deciding who we should recruit and stuff like that, and not the manager alone, which is another gray area, because if you have a manager doesn't have time to sit and watch everyone. They're not the best heads of recruitment. That's why people have heads of recruitment. And so I think it's slowly been progressing, and what he could have done in 6 months, he's done. Not everything has been great. Again, timing wise, we've spoken about Tuchel and stuff like that. That hasn't been great, but everything else, I think he's done a phenomenal job, from where Chelsea were 6 months ago to where they are now.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on the transfers there. Do you think any business will end up getting done in January?
Yes, because there is a clear need in the squad, for a midfielder and for maybe another wing back.
Okay.
But for an attacker, I think we would have to sell someone to get someone, just because it's already so crowded up there, with people unhappy with their minutes. So it's hard to Pulisic, Ziyech, Broja, Aubameyang, Mount. We have a lot of players. Havertz, so I can't see us getting an Nkunku or Rafa Leao unless we sell someone. Even then, we're in talks right now with Nkunku for the summer, not for the winter. I can see deals being done in January, but for the summer rather than them coming in January. But that's just for attackers. I think we definitely need a midfielder to come in. Unless Zakaria does really well in the World Cup and stuff like that. Wing back, again, we need depth in defense. So I see some of those coming in. But another thing Bowley has done really, really well at is clearing out the garbage. The team, under Abramovich and under Marina, we wouldn't sell Danny Drinkwater. We would loan them, or we would loan them until their contracts end, and it's a whole cycle where these guys are on your books forever. But he is no nonsense in that way. He's okay, we'll get 25 million for Timo Werner, cool. If he's not good enough to play here, we'll just get rid of him, rather than holding out for maybe someone will come in with 30 million.
Do you think that's partly to do with the loan rules changing as well? Because obviously I can't remember if they've changed now, if they are going to change, but obviously you can't loan out loads of players anymore. You can't keep doing this big model unless they've come from your academy. So loaning out someone like Emerson, say, you can't keep doing this year upon year because you can't loan more than 6 or 7.
I think that definitely played into it. But But at the same time, Chelsea, when you look at their loan army, which it's very popularly known as, most of it is academy players.
Okay.
So like most of the time, like that wasn't like the biggest concern, but that obviously is a concern like going forward. And so where we would have usually loaned Kennedy to fucking Palmeiras or something, or we would have loaned Emerson to West Ham instead of selling him. Like we're just cutting our losses on these players, getting rid of them, and starting afresh. And that's something that we didn't do under Abramovich, which cost us like a huge amount. And so that's another good thing that he's been doing. And so if we see that again in January, where if Pulisic has a good World Cup, for example, and someone comes in for like 30 million, will he say no? Like, I don't know. Let's see. So
let's see.
A lot up in the air for January. And then we spoke about earlier, like about how these players just pop up at the World Cup. We've never heard of, and they go for big money. So who knows? We might see some of them.
We definitely might. And then just before we do round off, from this section at least, I had a mate before the season actually started who came up with a very bold prediction saying that Chelsea wouldn't make the top 6 this season. What are your predictions for the rest of the season?
So we're currently set in 8th on 21 points. Tottenham are in 4th on 29 points, but they've played a game extra. So hoping that we win our game in hand. We're only 5 points off them. So I still think top 4 is like the goal. I'm glad we are out of the Carabao Cup. I hope we lose in the FA Cup early on as well, so we can just focus on the league. Champions League as well. If we can go far, it's okay, but I still see it as a distraction because our only goal this season should be top 4. We certainly have the squad to do it. It's if the squad is fit to do it. For example, like if we without Reece James, we're not doing it. Like if Reece James doesn't come back after the World Cup, like that's our season done. And Conte is expected to be back in February, which is a game changer. But again, you don't know how long he's going to be fit for. So there's a lot of injury-prone players that we have that we rely heavily on. If we can keep them fit, I don't see us not getting... Like, I see us getting top 4, and I don't see us, slipping away. Because, we've seen what we can do with those players in the team. And, beat Milan and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm not going to rule out top 4 just yet. And we also don't know who's going to come back injured from the World Cup for other teams, Like we spoke about Saka, maybe if he gets injured. Odegaard has been really important for... Odegaard's not going to the World Cup, but still.
World Cup, yeah.
Yeah. Gabriel's also not going, but
of course.
Yeah, Jesus might go. Yeah, he might get injured.
Martinelli again. So there could be injuries basically.
Yeah, there could be injuries. If Trippier gets injured for Newcastle, that's a huge hole for them.
For sure.
Harry Kane for Spurs, he gets injured every year. He has like an ankle injury.
Exactly.
So, we haven't had his yearly injury yet. And Son hasn't looked good this season. So,
And he's been injured anyway, hasn't he? He's picked up an injury. But still going to the World Cup. So, So you have to think if Kane gets injured, like that's Tottenham's goals, like, drying up. And so there's a lot of different factors that it's like, this is probably the most unpredictable season, which is making the part after the World Cup so exciting. Like I can't wait for the World Cup to be over. It's not even started, but I mean, it's going to be mental. I mean, that's been such a breakdown on Chelsea. That's probably going out as video, probably going to be about 40 minutes long. So I hope you've all enjoyed that one. We'll take a shortcut here before we come back to do the tier list of a couple of Chelsea managers.